It has been 1 year and counting since the pandemic has taken a toll on businesses all around the world. The art industry has been on somewhat of a hold, galleries being closed, museums closed, and art fairs canceled. But virtual art events have been booming, and so have art sales for artists and galleries that have pursued new avenues. So what has it taken to sell during the past year, and what new techniques have we learned that are keepers?
Gatsby, you're on mute. So are you, Kate. There we go.
I just got on. I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question. If you could just repeat that.
It wasn't one. We were just doing an introduction.
Good. Hi, guys.
Hi, Jeff. So I'd like to introduce Jeff Jaffe. Wave, there you go. The owner of Pop International Gallery in New York City. Kate Taylor. She's coming to us from her small cottage north of Toronto. And Gatsby, an artist working out of Tampa, Florida, that I've been working with a little bit too over the last year and a half, 2 years. Paints some great contemporary art. So we're going to talk about kind of avenues of art sales, what's been happening during the pandemic, you know, how do you keep your sales alive, that type of thing. So Jeff, let's start with you. Your gallery is in New York City. It's still open and operating. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Good job. How did you do it?
Well, you know, I don't think there was a formula that I could outline in brisk terms. I think it was about figuring things out as we sort of got hit by this pandemic, and then making decisions that were based solely on survival, frankly. How are we going to get through this? How am I going to keep the people who work for me employed? How am I going to support the artists that we represent? What is it that we do that we've done for the last 25 years that we now have to sort of shape? You know, it was a whole sort of process of thinking through what we were going to do. And it obviously turned out, frankly, that Zoom and electronics and the computer world and all of the sort of virtual stuff that people started to talk about began to fall into place. And again, I'm fortunate, our gallery is fortunate in that we've got 25 years of clients and relationships. Many of our artists have been with us from the day we opened 25 years ago at Pop International. And so the idea was to switch the notion of expecting people to just walk in the gallery every day and our reaching out to them in ways that we might not have done before. Yeah, we email people, you know, we do all that kind of stuff, but we realized very quickly that texting people, phoning people, emailing people, having virtual events, getting artists to make videos that we could place around and show, and social media and all of that clicked into place. And we've had some marvelous, marvelous experiences, certainly using Zoom and other electronic virtual avenues.
Yeah, your story isn't a lot different than ours. We have, here at Redwood Art Group, we have, 15 people, and we weren't allowed to do shows. We haven't done a show since December of 2019. And the first thing I thought to myself was, oh my God, how am I going to support everybody? You know, what are you going to do? And you have to make some very, very difficult decisions. You've got to hang on to your cash. You've got to, hopefully get everybody in unemployment and, kind of work through things. And then you got to start thinking about your community. That's like us today doing RAVE, trying to keep everybody together and try to make some sales for them. So very similar stories.
I made a conscious decision on whatever level I could not to let anybody go if it was possible for me to do that. And all the government support, the payroll protection programs and so on and so forth. So we were fortunate, amongst other things that I was able to do, to keep all of the sales team intact, which was pretty wonderful. And I'm grateful and humbled by that, frankly.
Yeah, good
and that
job.
they wanted to stay. That's a whole other thing.
And Kate, it's been an amazing year. And I know you mentioned that you used to do 20 shows. So what are some new avenues that you've done in the past year to continue selling?
Yeah, it's been definitely having to change the way I do business. Because I mean, typically, you know, with 20 shows a year, you constantly you're also always rebuilding your database. And like Jeff was saying, I think that personal connection and really reaching out to previous collectors is really critical. And, you know, I've been pretty religious about building that database and building those relationships for years, and they really came to fruition for me. I think that what kind of surprised me at the beginning of the pandemic is I expected people to kind of pull in and not buy, but in actual fact, I had people wanting big pieces. And so I really followed up on every single commission, every single email. I did so many video calls so people could, you know, from around the world, they could see the paintings, these tiny little paintings, and they spent like an hour with you. But, you know, I think a lot of it was about every single one making this personal connection. And so I've been really busy, and I actually was probably a bit overly optimistic, but I kept my revenue target this year. That was the same as last year, which was pretty aggressive, because I figure, you know, it's about not getting caught up in all the things that are going bad, but keeping positive with all the things that are going well, and kind of trying to provide that joy, I guess, to your clients.
Yeah, and your work definitely brings joy in a lot of people. So I'm sure a lot of your collectors needed that, especially in the last year.
Well, they needed that. I also, you know, as you know, I have a 0 risk commission policy. So basically, if you don't totally love it, you don't have to take it. And so I really pushed that, because that meant that people could be involved in something really fun and really creative and really positive, but without the risk of it, you know, and having to spend money on something they didn't love. And so in my experience, that always works really well.
Very good.
Very good.
Could I just come in and say one quick thing?
Yeah.
One of the other things that was quite remarkable, and certainly New York City was indicative of, we chatted about this the other day, was how many people were leaving the city and going into their second homes or buying homes out of the city. And consequently, there were lots of walls. People were, sorry, there's a big motorcycle going out outside. People have walls, and people were sitting around during the pandemic going, I need to put a piece of art on that wall, or, you know.
Yeah. Or I need something that's in the back of my Zoom call, you know, my Zoom meetings.
Yeah, exactly.
I did a lot of weird pieces that people put inside their closets, because that was the only place that they could have a quiet Zoom call. So it's like, oh, so my art's in a closet. I guess I'll be happy.
That's so funny. Jeff, I don't know if you saw it today, but you remember David Desantis, and he did that posthumous pieces with Basquiat?
Yeah, yes.
They sold it for 4 pieces sold today, a set for over 600 grand.
Yes, I know. Oh. I've actually just recently been involved in a whole series of Basquiat sales, and they're all in that range.
Yeah, but those it was signed by his dad. You remember those 4 pieces? So I was the one that introduced Adam Carr through my friend Fred Carr to David. Ah. And they created Desantis Carr Fine Art. And they asked me, Eric, would you like a set? And they charged me this very low price. It was $6,000. And this
it was the wholesale price.
Oh my God, I should have bought it.
Well, I can tell you, and I'll share this humbly, my set helped put my daughter through college.
Yeah, I bet.
That's cool.
So let's go on to Gatsby, because Gatsby, you did some very creative things, which I take my hat off to you. Tell us about the Airbnb staging and making some art sales through that.
Yeah, hey everybody. So I'm in Florida, and a lot of people have been traveling to Florida during the pandemic because, you know, they've been a lot more open than other states. And I placed my work in several high-end, I wouldn't call them mansions, but really large homes that were Airbnbs. And I knew the owner, and they'd sat there for about 6 months, and nothing happened. And I'd really never spent any time with them. And I spent a few hours with them. And Eric, I think you're the one that taught me actually that people buy the artist and the story as much as they buy the art. And after spending a few hours with him, I mean, he actually sold 2 pieces today. I mean, he's been consistently selling between 2 and 4 pieces a week out of his Airbnbs for me. And during the pandemic, I've really that relationship helped me realize that I should focus on expanding my relationships with my other collectors and turning them into advocates and almost brokers as well, because they're passionate about the work and buy into the whole story and know what my work's about. So they tell the story passionately when people come over anyway. And that's helped my sales go up dramatically, even during the pandemic when we weren't able to have live events and fairs.
Excellent. That's a great story. It is about the relationship, and it's about the stories that people, when a collector buys a new piece of work and they put it up on their wall, and then they have friends over for dinner and they're like, oh, you got a new painting there, right? They don't talk about, oh, it's mixed media on camp. They talk about the whole experience, about meeting the artist or buying the painting or why they, it's all about that. So the stories are what's key.
I think it's also about being bold. I think that this is an opportunity where, you can do things that are outside of the norm because, even if it screws up, you can always kind of put it down to, well, the COVID. And so things are different. But I think that it's a matter of not wallowing in what's happening, but looking at the opportunities that are out there. And I think like Gatsby is doing, it's kind of like he saw a need and he went after it. He didn't think about whether or not it was going to work or not. Like you just try it and it worked, which is amazing. And if it didn't work, then you've got nothing to lose.
Right.
Well, correct. And there's plenty of stories we're not telling that didn't work. So,
well, I share those on my Instagram.
You do that.
But I think the other thing that I really did too is I really missed people because I'm an extrovert. And that was probably the hardest thing for me is my husband was so happy to be at home all the time and it was driving me crazy. So I started doing these interviews called Talking to Artists, which I'm on like episode almost 50 now, where I would just reach out to artists that I like and we'd have a chat about it. And from that, I had a lot of people say, well, it's great that you're introducing us to other artists, but we now want to know what you're doing. So I started doing chats about as I was working in the studio so they could see what I'm doing and see how I'm doing. And I would talk about commissions or my color choices or whatever. But, I find making that personal connection has been so critical.
Absolutely. And kind of showing people the process of your work, I think, makes them fall in love with it a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
That's been,
and then they can talk about it.
If I may add something to that, one of the things about the way we work at the Pop Gallery is developing a relationship between the artist and the collector, not the artist and me per se, because that's abundantly clear and obvious. But the relationships that we're able to foster between collectors and artists over the years has been something really spectacular. But with COVID, having been locked up and making art because that's all they could do, and then having these lovely electronic virtual events, they became much more sort of intimate. People could talk to each other and they were, oh, when I was in the gallery a few years, it was amazing. It's been an amazing time on that level.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's really cool.
And speaking of virtual events, Jeff, you did a virtual event with Ron English, right? I
did. We had been trying to do something for quite some time, and we had a chat about it, and he decided to do a project for Pop that he'd never really done before. And so we had some basis to sort of really go out to our collectors and say, we have a lovely thing to do with Ron. But what we also did was we used social media significantly before we did our Zoom event. Instagram Live was a wonderful thing. I think we might have had 3,000 people just on our Instagram Live moment. And that sort of opened up a whole bunch of stuff. And then the RSVP to the Zoom event, it was by invite only and by RSVP only. It was just remarkable. And Ron was lovely and was, sitting in front of the art in the studio and being really chatty and deeply sort of sincere about what he does. It was really special.
That's awesome. So Kate, you have 14 galleries in the US and Canada, which says a lot about your work itself. Did you do anything to help to assist them during the past year to keep things moving?
Oh, absolutely. And some of those galleries actually are art consultants. And I do have one in England as well. But I think that what I did is I always really look at the relationships with the gallery as a real partnership. So one of the things I did struggle with was whether or not to put pricing on my website or not, because I didn't want to get in a situation where I was undercutting my galleries. And some of the galleries in the US have prices that are more expensive than the Canadian galleries. So I only have very small pieces on sale for my website. But I also really made sure to, the pieces that were on my website, I directed them to the galleries where they were selling, but I also actually encouraged them to do social media. So for example, I think with all of the galleries, I invited them on to talking to artists, and they had actually not done a live interview before because it's kind of not scripted. And from that, they started doing their own and interviewing artists. And so I think that's part of it. Probably the biggest thing I did though, is I reached out to each gallery and I kind of said, okay, so instead of me just bringing a bunch of stuff in and you can tell me what you like, tell me what you need. Like what colors are you seeing? What trends are you seeing? What are you finding your clients are asking for? What are your designer clients asking for? And then I will paint to that palette. And so I think that that helped them have something that was going to be just a faster, easier sell for them.
People sell what they like.
For sure. Yeah. And I think that I know if I do turquoises and blues, they'll sell. I love to do oranges and pinks, and they're a harder sell, right? Because not everyone's really into that, especially in Canada. But most of our galleries were closed pretty much for the year. So the US has been much more open, which for me has been a godsend because it's allowed me to actually continue to sell through the galleries because it's been really tough in Canada.
Yeah, and Gatsby, you work a lot in social media as well. I know you do a lot of DMing and outreach and kind of putting yourself out there.
Yeah, correct. So I not only DM people, I've also, during COVID, I actually saw a massive uptick in what people were willing to spend online as well. You know, I've advertised every post I've ever done on Instagram. So I've definitely honed in on the audience that responds the most to my work compared to where I was 3 years ago when I started advertising. But I've also seen people a lot more willing to make purchases from an artist that they hadn't heard of before, to where before the pandemic, I mean, sometimes I'd go a month or 5 weeks without selling anything myself on social media. And now to where I'm selling, you know, between 3 and 5 originals a week on social media just through the Instagram posts.
That's great.
It's a powerful tool, which is really incredible for artists.
It is.
And that's another whole learning curve, right? Learning how to do it and how to be efficient with your time to do social media and kind of get something back from it that's going to be beneficial to your clients.
Or you hire Hannah.
Yeah, or you hire me.
You hire
I wish.
We were able,
I'm a control monger. I can't do that.
we were also very much able to, our artists who are on social media, who would do their own sort of marketing, all of that, they referred clients right back to us. Collectors would be, hey, I just reached out to so-and-so on, in fact, yesterday we had a lovely little sale that happened based entirely on an artist doing something on social media. Our collector reached out to him and he referred them back to us. And so this sort of symbiotic, wonderful thing has occurred and continues to occur.
And I think that's really important to managing your galleries. I mean, it's like a marriage. There has to be trust there. And certainly if I have a sale that goes through a gallery, I tag them and I post on Instagram. If I'm doing a piece for a gallery, I'll tag them. And I always direct clients back. Like one of the things I am finding though is sometimes clients will go to the gallery and they come to you, and at time it's hard sometimes to figure out that they actually were the gallery's client. Sure. So, but I always follow up afterwards and give them the commission that's due, because I think they do an awful lot for me that they don't specifically get paid for. So it has to be fair.
Yeah, that's great.
Absolutely.
Well, thanks everybody. I mean, for taking your time and sharing these stories with our audience. We really appreciate it. Kate, Jeff, and Gatsby. And we're going to talk about Gatsby in a minute, aren't we?
Give me a call, Gatsby.
Thanks. It was great to meet you guys.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate it.
Thanks.